My driveway was blocked with barbed wire, actual, sharp, prison-grade barbed wire, by a woman holding a grass ruler and saying she was protecting the neighborhood. From what? My gravel? She claimed it was about standards. I think it was about power and the HOA's weird obsession with domination by paperwork. What followed was petty, absurd, and somehow deeply satisfying. Let's just say the ducks weren't the only ones disturbed. If you've ever had a neighbor try to run your life with fine print and fake smiles, you'll want to hear this. Comment below if your HOA ever pulled something insane, because mine didn't just cross a line, they wrapped it in wire and dared me to notice. So there I am, coffee mug in hand, staring at a brand new chain link fence topped with barbed wire that definitely wasn't there when I went to bed. And standing next to it like she's guarding Fort Knox is this woman in a power suit at 5 in the morning, holding what looks like a ruler for measuring grass height. She introduces herself as Lewis Hale, chairwoman of the Homeowners Association, and launches into this 15-minute speech about neighborhood standards and property values while I'm still trying to figure out why there's a fence blocking my driveway. She's got a portable mic, like she's running for office, preaching about how this isn't the Wild West and promising to bring suburban order. Now, I spent 15 years working for the county, maintaining and building bridges, so I know a thing or two about property lines and permits. I tell her I need to see the paperwork for this fence, and she waves around this folder like it's the Constitution itself. But when I actually look at the survey map, something's not right. The fence line is about 3 feet onto my property, which means she's not just blocking my access, she's stealing my land. I point this out, and instead of apologizing or offering to fix it, she doubles down. She tells me that the Homeowners Association has decided this area needs to be standardized and that my ranch doesn't fit the aesthetic vision of the neighborhood. That's when my neighbor Malcolm Simmons walks over from his auto repair shop next door. Malcolm's been in this neighborhood for 20 years, long before any of these homeowners associations showed up, and he's got stories. He pulls me aside and tells me about the previous HOA that tried to fine him $10,000 for speaking up at a meeting about their overreach. He says, "Justin, these people don't stop until someone stops them. They'll bury you in paperwork and legal fees if you let them." Malcolm's got this way of cutting through nonsense that I appreciate, and he's warning me that Louie isn't just some overzealous neighbor. She's someone who gets off on controlling other people. Louie overhears us talking and decides to make her position crystal clear. She says that if I try to remove or damage the fence, the HOA will fine me $3,000 for destruction of community property. When I point out again that it's on my land, she just smiles and says, "Prove it in court, Mr. Patterson. This isn't the wild frontier anymore." The way she says it with this condescending tone like she's talking to a child, something clicks in my brain. I've dealt with bureaucratic bullies before, but this lady has elevated it to an art form. But here's the thing about being a bridge engineer for 15 years. You learn to see solutions where other people see problems. While Louie is standing there gloating about her fence and talking about community standards, I'm looking at that 3-foot strip of my property and starting to get an idea. If she wants to play games with property lines and community access, I can play that game too. I've got permits and engineering knowledge, and most importantly, I know how to work within the system to get exactly what I want. I tell Lewis that I need to review the documentation more carefully and that we'll need to discuss this further. She seems satisfied that she's intimidated me and packs up her measuring device and microphone setup. But as she's walking away, I call out to her, "By the way, Mrs. Hale, you might want to double-check those property lines. I think you're going to find this conversation isn't over." She just waves me off like I'm some rube who doesn't understand how things work in civilized society. As soon as she's gone, I'm back in my house pulling out my surveying equipment and the original property deed. 15 years of infrastructure work teaches you to document everything, and I've got a complete survey of my property from when I bought it. Sure enough, that fence is 3 feet onto my land, which means I've got options. Malcolm comes over with a cup of coffee and finds me sketching on graph paper. When he asks what I'm drawing, I show him the rough design for a small pedestrian bridge that would go right over Lewis's fence. Malcolm starts laughing and says, "Justin, you might be crazier than she is, but I like your style." 3 days later, I've got a beautiful little wooden bridge spanning right over Louie's fence, complete with a hand-painted sign that reads, "Toll, $1." The look on her face when she sees it is worth every splinter I got building the thing. But before I tell you about her reaction, let me back up and explain how we got here. because the process of building this bridge was almost as entertaining as what happened after. First thing Monday morning, I'm down at the county office filing for a construction permit. The clerk looks at my bridge plans and asks if I'm sure I want to build a toll bridge in a residential neighborhood. I explain that it's on my property, it's designed to county standards, and according to municipal code, there's nothing preventing a private landowner from charging for access across their property. The permit's approved right away. Simple design, I know the code. I also file a property complaint while I'm there just to get it on record. Building the bridge itself takes 3 days of work, with some lumber I had lying around from other ranch projects. It's nothing fancy, just a simple arch design about 4 feet wide and 8 feet long, with handrails and everything properly bolted together. Malcolm comes over each day after work to help, and we turn it into a bit of a neighborhood event. People start walking by to see what we're building, and I explain the situation to anyone who asks. Most of them think it's hilarious, especially when they hear about Louie's early morning fence installation. The bridge is finished on Thursday morning, and I spend the afternoon painting the sign and setting up a small cash box. I'm not actually expecting anyone to pay the toll, it's more about making a point. But then something unexpected happens. Simon Taylor, the delivery driver who works this route, shows up with a dollar bill and asks to be the first official customer. He takes out his phone and starts recording as he pays the toll and walks across the bridge, narrating the whole thing like he's documenting some kind of historic moment. Within an hour, there's a line of people waiting to pay $1 to cross my bridge. Neighbors I've never met are showing up with dollar bills, taking pictures, and treating it like some kind of tourist attraction. Malcolm sets up a folding chair and starts directing traffic, joking that we need to establish bridge crossing protocols. The whole thing takes on a carnival atmosphere, with people laughing and taking selfies on the bridge, while Lewis's fence sits there looking more ridiculous by the minute. That's when Louie shows up for round 2. She's got her microphone set up again and a folder full of papers, and she is not happy. She marches up to my bridge and declares it a public nuisance and demands that I tear it down immediately. I hand her my construction permit and explain that everything is legal, properly built, and entirely on my property. She looks at the permit, looks at the bridge, and I can practically see the steam coming out of her ears. She starts giving another speech about community standards and how my bridge is making a mockery of neighborhood aesthetics. But this time, she's got an audience of people who just paid to cross the bridge and are clearly enjoying the whole situation. When she tries to grab my toll sign, saying it's inappropriate commercial activity, she underestimates how slippery the morning dew has made the grass around the fence area. Down she goes, right into the muddy patch that's formed from yesterday's rain, and her perfectly pressed power suit is suddenly not so perfect anymore. The whole crowd starts laughing, and Simon captures the entire thing on video. Louie gets up, caked in mud, her designer blazer now resembling a wet napkin, and her hair, once styled with military precision, is unraveling like her authority. For the first time since I met her, she's speechless. The crowd doesn't say a word either, but the silence is worse than laughter. It's judgmental. She knows it. She tries to maintain her dignity while wiping mud off her jacket, but there's no coming back from that kind of public humiliation. Malcolm hands her a paper towel and says, "Careful there, Mrs. Hale. That's what happens when you try to mess with someone else's property." She snatches the towel, glares at all of us, and storms off toward her car. But before she leaves, she turns around and shouts, "This isn't over, Patterson. You haven't heard the last of this." The crowd gives her a sarcastic round of applause, and Simon keeps recording until she drives away. As the excitement dies down and people start heading home, Malcolm and I count up the toll money. We've collected $43 in about 2 hours, which wasn't the point, but it's nice to know the bridge is paying for itself. More importantly, word is spreading about the situation, and public opinion seems to be firmly on my side. Simon tells me he's going to post his video online, and several other people mention sharing their photos with friends. I'm cleaning up the toll area when Malcolm says something that sticks with me. "You know, Justin, you've got her rattled. But rattled animals do unpredictable things. I'd keep an eye on that bridge if I were you." At the time, I think he's just being overcautious, but Malcolm's got experience with HOA retaliation, and I should have listened more carefully to his warning. I wake up Friday morning to find my bridge in pieces, charred and broken, with what looks like crowbar marks on the support posts, but the most interesting thing isn't the damage itself. It's the piece of expensive fabric caught on one of the splintered rails, fabric that matches exactly what Louie was wearing at yesterday's HOA meeting. Sometimes people are their own worst enemies, and Louie just handed me the evidence I need to turn this whole situation around. Seeing the destroyed bridge hits hard. I built it myself, not just for a point, but as a stand against bullies. Now it's ashes and bent metal. Coffee goes cold in my hand as anger rises, real anger at the petty cruelty of small people. Malcolm comes over as soon as he sees me surveying the damage. He takes one look at the scene and shakes his head. This is exactly what the old HOA did to me when I spoke up at their meetings. They couldn't beat me with rules and regulations, so they decided to play dirty. He tells me about how the previous homeowners association would vandalize property and then deny any involvement, counting on people being too intimidated or too broke to fight back through legal channels. While Malcolm and I are examining the wreckage, Simon shows up for his regular delivery route and starts recording again. He's outraged on my behalf and starts documenting the damage, pointing out the obvious signs of deliberate destruction. "This isn't some random vandalism," he says into his phone camera. "Someone came here specifically to destroy this bridge, and they used tools to do it." He's got a good eye for detail, and he's capturing evidence that might be useful later. That's when I notice the fabric caught on the broken rail. It's a piece of expensive-looking material, cream-colored with a subtle pattern, and it's definitely not something that would blow in from random trash. I carefully remove it with tweezers and put it in a plastic bag, the same way I used to collect evidence when I worked construction sites with safety violations. Malcolm sees what I'm doing and nods approvingly. Good thinking. That might be important later. The more I look at the destruction, the more obvious it becomes that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act of vandalism. Someone brought tools, probably a crowbar and maybe even an accelerant for the burning. They knew exactly what they were doing and how to cause maximum damage in minimum time. This was planned, deliberate, and personal. The message was clear: step out of line and we'll destroy what you build. I didn't want to jump to conclusions just because I hated Louis' guts, so I took the fabric sample, printed a photo of it from my phone, and spent the rest of the afternoon casually chatting with folks nearby. I asked around, "Hey, did you see anyone near the property late last night? Hear anything weird?" Nobody saw much, but old Mr. Donnelly from 3 doors down mentioned seeing a silver SUV parked near the corner stop sign around 2 a.m. "Didn't think anything of it," he said. "Figured it was Uber drivers waiting for a ping." I jotted that down and walked over to the corner where the SUV had allegedly parked. Right at the edge of the sidewalk, buried under some dry grass, was a cigarette butt. Brand, Avalon Gold. Malcolm raised an eyebrow when I showed him. "That's a rich lady's smoke," he said. "My ex used to hide those in her purse like diamonds." Later that evening, I called Simon and asked if he could pull screenshots from his earlier footage of Louis, anything showing her smoking or standing by her car. He found a perfect frame. Louis, cream-colored suit, Avalon Gold in hand. It wasn't hard evidence, yet, but it was building a picture. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was preparing to outflank a woman who thought barbed wire made her queen. But here's what Louis doesn't understand about people who've worked construction and infrastructure for 15 years. We don't give up when something gets broken. We fix it, we improve it, and we make it stronger than it was before. I spend the rest of Friday morning cleaning up the debris and sketching out plans for Bridge 2.0. This time I'm not just building a simple wooden walkway, I'm building something that can't be easily destroyed. Malcolm offers to help with the reconstruction, and we start planning a bridge that's not just functional but also visible from the street. If Louis wants to play demolition games, she's going to discover that I can build things faster than she can tear them down. We decide to add some features that weren't on the original bridge: better lighting, a more robust design, and maybe even a small security camera to discourage future vandalism. While we're making plans, Simon comes back with news from his delivery route. Apparently, Louis held an emergency HOA meeting Thursday night, right after her muddy tumble at my bridge. According to his sources, she spent the entire meeting ranting about unauthorized commercial activity and threats to property values. Several neighbors have mentioned that she seemed unusually agitated, even for her, and made some vague threats about taking action to resolve the bridge situation. The pieces are starting to come together, and that fabric sample is looking more important by the hour. I've got a pretty good idea where it came from, but I need to be smart about how I use this information. Direct confrontation hasn't worked with Louis. She just doubles down on her position and gets more aggressive. But evidence of criminal activity properly documented and presented might be exactly what I need to turn the tables. As I'm sweeping up the last of the debris, I make a decision that will change everything about how this conflict plays out. I'm not just going to rebuild the bridge. I'm going to make it impossible for Louise to operate in the shadows anymore. Every move she makes from now on is going to be documented, recorded, and used to show the neighborhood exactly what kind of person they're dealing with. She wanted to escalate things to destruction and intimidation, but she just picked a fight with someone who knows how to build things that last. 2 days later, I've got a new bridge that's not just bigger and stronger than the original, it's lit up with LED lights and has become the unofficial social media check-in spot for the entire neighborhood. But Louie isn't done with her dirty tricks, and she's about to learn that when you play with fire, sometimes you get burned by your own flames. The new bridge isn't just functional, it's a statement. Where the first was protest, this one is pride. The wooden beams are carved with little designs donated by local kids. One of them even painted a tiny duck in the corner, calling back to the lake that started this all. Malcolm and I spent Saturday and Sunday building something that looks like it belongs in a city park rather than spanning a suburban fence dispute. We used pressure-treated lumber throughout, added decorative elements, and installed a lighting system that makes the bridge visible from 3 blocks away. The new sign reads, "Patterson's Bridge, check-in $1," with smaller text explaining that all proceeds go to neighborhood improvement projects. Simon shows up Monday morning with his phone, ready to document the grand reopening, and what happens next surprises everyone. Instead of just a few curious neighbors, there's actually a line of people waiting to cross the bridge and take pictures. Someone has spread the word about the rebuilt bridge, and it's become a local attraction. People are bringing their kids, taking family photos, and treating it like a legitimate tourist destination. The bridge becomes a gathering place in ways I never expected. The bridge quickly becomes a hangout spot. Someone brings cookies, another sets up artwork, and by noon, it's a spontaneous community market, with Lewis's fence looking sillier by the minute. But that afternoon, the mood started shifting. A few neighbors began whispering. Mrs. Talbot, who had brought homemade brownies for the bake sale, pulled me aside. "Justin, I don't know. Louie came by this morning and said she had documents showing the bridge's footings weren't up to code, that if someone fell, you'd be liable for hospital bills." I tried to reassure her, but the seed of doubt was already growing. Another man I didn't know well frowned as he crossed and muttered, "Just hope this thing doesn't collapse with my kids on it." It was subtle, but Louis' fear campaign was working. I saw fewer selfies, more nervous glances, and all because of fake paperwork from someone who never swung a hammer in her life. That's when Louie makes her next move, and it's even more underhanded than destroying the bridge. She starts spreading rumors that the bridge is unsafe and that people are going to get hurt crossing it. She goes door to door in the neighborhood with a folder full of fake engineering reports and warnings about liability issues and structural deficiencies. She's telling people that when someone inevitably falls off the bridge, they'll be able to sue me for everything I own. The rumor campaign is more effective than I want to admit. By Tuesday afternoon, the steady stream of bridge visitors has slowed to a trickle, and people are looking at my perfectly safe, well-built bridge like it might collapse at any moment. Louie has managed to weaponize fear and liability concerns to achieve what direct confrontation couldn't. She's turning public opinion against the bridge without having to prove any of her claims. But remember that piece of fabric I found in the wreckage of the original bridge? I've been doing some research, and it turns out that cream-colored material with the subtle pattern is from a very expensive designer suit. The same suit Louie was wearing at the HOA meeting the night before my bridge got destroyed. I've got photos of her in that suit from Simon's video, and the fabric sample is a perfect match. Wednesday morning, I decide it's time to play my ace card. I create a simple display board with photos of the destroyed bridge, the fabric sample, and screenshots from Simon's video showing Louie in the matching suit. I set it up next to the toll collection area with a sign that reads, "Evidence of vandalism, neighborhood watch in effect." I don't accuse anyone directly, but I let the evidence speak for itself. The response is immediate and dramatic. People start gathering around the evidence display, connecting the dots and getting angry about the bridge destruction. Simon records everything and interviews several neighbors who express outrage that someone would resort to vandalism and then spread lies about safety concerns. The community opinion begins to shift back in my favor, but more importantly, people are starting to see Lewis's true character. Malcolm comes over that afternoon with news from his network of longtime neighborhood residents. Apparently, Lewis' door-to-door rumor campaign has backfired spectacularly. Instead of convincing people that the bridge is dangerous, she's convinced them that she's desperate and dishonest. Several people have mentioned that her engineering reports look fake, and everyone knows that destroying other people's property is wrong, regardless of your opinions about neighborhood aesthetic. That evening, Louis calls an emergency HOA meeting to discuss the bridge situation and community safety concerns. She sends out notices claiming that the bridge has become a public nuisance that needs to be addressed through proper channels. What she doesn't realize is that her credibility is already shot, and this meeting is going to backfire in ways she can't imagine. The community center is just a brick building, but tonight it feels like a courtroom, a stage, and a powder keg rolled into one. As I approach the front steps, I can feel dozens of eyes watching. I'm not sure if they expect drama or justice, but I know I'm bringing both. Simon tells me he's planning to record the entire meeting, and several neighbors have mentioned they're coming specifically to support the bridge and oppose Louis' tactics. Malcolm warns me that cornered animals are dangerous, but I think Louis has already made her biggest mistakes. The fabric evidence, the fake engineering reports, and her pattern of escalating retaliation have painted a picture that's going to be very hard for her to explain away. Thursday night's HOA meeting turns into a complete disaster for Louis when her own secretary, Melanie Walters, stands up and throws a stack of financial documents on the table, exposing Louis for embezzling HOA funds to pay for the bridge destruction. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving people enough rope to hang themselves, and Louis has been weaving that rope for months. The community center is packed like I've never seen it before. Word has spread about the bridge controversy, and it seems like half the neighborhood has showed up to see how this plays out. Louis has set up at the front table with her microphone and a stack of papers, clearly expecting to control the narrative and steamroll any opposition. She's wearing a different outfit tonight, probably because I've got evidence linking her cream-colored suit to the bridge vandalism. Melanie Walters, the HOA secretary, looks nervous as she takes her seat next to Louis. I've been working on Melanie for the past few days, ever since Malcolm mentioned that she's been unhappy with how Louis treats her. Melanie does all the actual work while Louis takes all the credit, and she's been getting increasingly frustrated with being treated like unpaid help. It turns out that Melanie has access to all the HOA financial records, and she's been noticing some irregularities in the budget. Louis calls the meeting to order and immediately launches into a presentation about community standards and property value protection. She's got slides and charts showing how my bridge allegedly threatens the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal and might impact home values. She presents her fake engineering reports as if they're legitimate safety assessments and demands that the HOA take official action to force the bridge's removal. That's when I stand up and present my evidence display. I show the photos of the destroyed bridge, explain how the fabric sample matches Louis' suit from the night before the vandalism, and point out the timing of her safety claims. I keep my presentation factual and let the evidence speak for itself, but the impact on the room is obvious. People are connecting dots and getting angry about the deception. Louis calls it circumstantial, blames me for community disruption, and gets personal. But the more she talks, the guiltier she sounds. And no one's buying it. I raise my voice, not with anger, but with precision. Louis, you claim to care about community harmony, but which part of harmony involves burning down a handmade structure? Which part involves door-to-door fear-mongering? She sneered. You're twisting facts. None of what you say proves anything. You're manipulating the room with anecdotes and stage displays. I took a step forward. So your fabric just wandered onto my burned bridge all by itself? So the receipts from demolition companies paying with HOA funds are also fake? Explain that to us. We're listening. She paused. Too long. The silence wasn't friendly. I could feel the shift in the room. Whispers, murmurs, someone coughing pointedly. People who'd supported her before now stared at her like a used car they regretted buying. She looked like she wanted to scream but knew it wouldn't help. Then Melanie stood up, and the fire truly began. That's when Melanie stands up, walks to the front of the room, and dumps a stack of financial documents on the table. Her hands are shaking, but her voice is steady as she announces that she's discovered Louis has been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including payments to a demolition company, the day after the bridge was destroyed. The room goes completely silent as Melanie explains that she's been keeping detailed records of all HOA expenditures, and there are several suspicious payments that Louis can't account for. Louis goes ballistic. She starts screaming about betrayal and conspiracy and claiming that Melanie is lying to protect me. But Melanie just keeps laying out documents, bank statements, invoices, and receipts that show a clear pattern of financial misconduct. The most damaging piece of evidence is a receipt for $300 paid to B&D Demolition Services with a handwritten note that says, Bridge Removal - Emergency Community Safety. The crowd erupts. People are shouting questions, demanding explanations, and calling for Louis' immediate resignation. Simon is recording everything, and several other people have their phones out documenting the chaos. Malcolm stands up and gives a speech about how this is exactly the kind of corruption that destroyed the previous HOA, and how the neighborhood needs leadership that works for the community instead of against it. Louis tries to regain control by claiming the demolition payment was justified because the bridge was a safety hazard, but that just makes things worse. People start asking why she didn't follow proper procedures, why she didn't get multiple bids for the work, and why she tried to cover it up by spreading false rumors about bridge safety. Her explanations become increasingly contradictory and desperate. The meeting ends with a motion to immediately remove Louis from her position as HOA chairwoman. The vote is unanimous except for Louis herself, who storms out of the room screaming about lawsuits and revenge. Melanie is elected as interim chairwoman, and her first official act is to apologize to me on behalf of the HOA and to announce that all restrictions on the bridge are lifted. As people are filing out of the community center, Malcolm comes over and shakes my hand. "Well, Justin, you've officially won this round. But Louis didn't strike me as someone who accepts defeat gracefully. I'd keep an eye on your property for the next few days." At the time, I think the worst is over, but Malcolm's warning turns out to be more prophetic than either of us realized. Louis's last desperate attempt at revenge involves hiring thugs to vandalize my entire ranch. But security cameras catch everything, and she ends up in handcuffs while I stand there holding a sign that reads, "Toll closed." Sometimes justice isn't just served, it's served with a side of poetic irony that makes the whole ordeal worthwhile. The weekend after the HOA meeting is quiet, which makes me suspicious. Louis has been humiliated, removed from power, and exposed as both a vandal and an embezzler, but she hasn't made any attempt to apologize or make amends. Malcolm's warning about wounded animals keeps echoing in my head, so I decide to upgrade my security measures. I install cameras around the ranch property, focusing on areas where someone might try to cause damage without being seen from the road. Monday morning brings news that Louis has hired a lawyer and is threatening to sue everyone involved in her removal from the HOA. She's claiming that the financial documents were forged, that the bridge fabric evidence was planted, and that the entire neighborhood has conspired against her. The lawyer sends official-looking letters demanding that I remove the bridge and pay damages for defamation of character. It's desperate legal theater, but it shows that Louis isn't going away quietly. Tuesday night, around 2 a.m, the security cameras start recording. 3 men with crowbars and bolt cutters approach the ranch property, and they're not here to admire the bridge. They systematically begin destroying everything they can reach: fence posts, mailbox, garden areas, and of course, the bridge itself. But this time, every moment is being recorded in high definition from multiple angles. I wake up to the sound of splintering wood and immediately check the camera feeds on my phone. The vandalism is in progress, and I can see the men working their way through my property like they're following a specific plan. I call the police and then call Malcolm, who lives close enough to be on the scene quickly. While I'm watching the feeds, I see something that makes my blood boil. Louis's car parked at the end of the street with her inside, apparently coordinating the attack. The police arrive just as the vandals are finishing their work on the bridge. The men try to run, but Malcolm has positioned himself to block their escape route while staying safely out of their reach. All 3 are arrested, and when the police search them, they find a cell phone with recent calls to Louis' number and a handwritten list of targets on my property. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. But the best part comes when the police approach Louis's car. She tries to drive away, but there's nowhere to go with police cars blocking both ends of the street. When they pull her over, her explanation is that she was just out for a late-night drive and had no idea what was happening at my property. The police aren't buying it, especially when they check the call log on the vandal's phone and find multiple calls to her number during the attack. As Louis is being arrested, I walk out to the street carrying a sign I made earlier that week as a joke. It reads, "Toll closed, management unavailable." I stand there holding it while the police put handcuffs on Louis and load her into the patrol car. She sees me with the sign and starts screaming that this is all a setup and that I've ruined her life. I don't say a word. I just hold up the sign like a game show host unveiling the grand prize. The neighbors cheer. One guy yells, "I'd pay $10 to see this again." The irony is perfect. She's being arrested for destroying my property while accusing me of destroying her life. Simon's already live streaming as the patrol car pulls away. Within 15 minutes, his video has over 2,000 views and climbing. One viewer comments, "HOA Karen goes full felony. This is gold." Another writes, "I'd pay double to cross that bridge now." By morning, the footage is reposted on a local news blog. By noon, regional TV is calling it the Toll Troll Saga. Reporters show up asking for interviews. I decline, but Simon takes center stage, proudly walking them through the timeline, receipts, and even holding up the original Toll $1 sign like it's a museum artifact. Louis wanted to control a community. She ended up starring in its origin story. Simon shows up just as the police cars are leaving, and he manages to record Louis's final meltdown as she's driven away in handcuffs. Several neighbors come out to see what's happening, and word spreads quickly about the arrests. By morning, everyone in the neighborhood knows that Louis tried to have my ranch vandalized and got caught red-handed coordinating the attack. The legal consequences for Louis are swift and severe. The vandalism charges are serious enough, but the fact that she organized and paid for the attack makes it conspiracy and possibly racketeering. Her lawyer drops her case immediately when the security footage becomes public, and she ends up facing criminal charges instead of pursuing civil litigation. The HOA financial irregularities also trigger an investigation that uncovers additional embezzlement charges. Within a week, Louis' house goes up for sale as she tries to raise money for legal defense. The sign in her front yard becomes a neighborhood joke, with people taking pictures next to it and posting about the former HOA dictator's downfall. Malcolm suggests that someone should buy the house just to prevent another power-hungry HOA wannabe from moving in, and it turns out to be a prescient suggestion. The three men who vandalize my property turn out to be small-time criminals. Louis found through some kind of online service for questionable labor. They immediately confess and agree to testify against Louis in exchange for reduced sentences. Their testimony reveals that Louis had been planning the attack for weeks and had paid them $500 each to teach that bridge guy a lesson he'll never forget. As I'm cleaning up the damage to my property and rebuilding the bridge for the third time, I reflect on how completely the situation has reversed. Louis went from being the self-appointed neighborhood authority to being a criminal defendant facing multiple felony charges. The bridge went from being a symbol of defiance to being a symbol of community resilience. And I went from being the guy who just wanted to be left alone to being the guy who accidentally became a neighborhood hero. 6 months later, I'm the proud owner of Louis' former house, which I've converted into a community center, complete with a sign out front that reads, Patterson Community Hall, formerly Hale Residence. The bridge has become a permanent neighborhood landmark, and Louis, well, let's just say she's learning about community service from a very different perspective. The auction for Louis' house happens on a Tuesday morning, and there's quite a crowd gathered to watch. The legal bills from her criminal defense have forced her into bankruptcy, and everything has to go to pay for lawyers and restitution. I show up with a pre-approved loan and a specific plan for the property, though I keep my intentions to myself until after the bidding is over. Most people assume I'm buying the house out of spite or revenge, but the truth is more practical. Louis' house sits on a large corner lot that's perfectly positioned to serve as a community gathering space. It's got a big backyard, plenty of parking, and it's centrally located for most of the neighborhood. After dealing with months of HOA drama and community conflict, I've realized that what we really need is a place where people can come together and work out problems before they escalate to bridge destruction and criminal charges. The renovation takes about 3 months, with help from Malcolm, Simon, and several other neighbors who've gotten invested in the project. We turn the house into a full community center. Meetings up front, coffee in the kitchen, a park out back, and the basement holds event gear and supplies. The best part of the renovation is installing the sign. Malcolm and I spend an afternoon mounting a beautiful wooden sign that reads, Patterson Community Hall, in large letters with smaller text underneath that says Formerly Hale Residence, ST 2024. It's not meant to be cruel, but it serves as a permanent reminder of what happens when someone tries to control a community through fear and intimidation instead of cooperation and mutual respect. The bridge itself has evolved into something I never expected. What started as a $1 toll crossing has become completely free, with a donation box for people who want to contribute to community projects. The original wooden structure has been replaced with a more permanent stone and steel design that's built to last for decades. Local artists have added decorative elements, and someone installed a small plaque that tells the story of the bridge controversy. Melanie Walters has turned out to be an excellent HOA chairwoman. She's focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement, and she's established a conflict resolution process that prevents disputes from escalating to the level of property destruction. The HOA meetings are now well-attended community discussions rather than one-person power trips, and people actually look forward to participating. Simon has become something of a local celebrity through his documentation of the bridge saga. His videos of the conflict and resolution have been viewed thousands of times, and he's started a neighborhood newsletter that keeps everyone informed about community events and decisions. He's also appointed himself as the unofficial bridge historian, maintaining a display of photos and documents that tell the complete story. The community center hosts its grand opening on a Saturday afternoon in late summer, with a ribbon-cutting ceremony and a neighborhood potluck. The turnout is amazing. Families with kids, longtime residents like Malcolm, and newcomers who've heard about our little community success story. The bridge serves as the symbolic entrance to the celebration, with people crossing it to reach the community center. As I'm standing on the bridge during the opening ceremony, watching kids run around the playground and adults having conversations at the picnic tables, I get a phone call from an unknown number. It's Louie, calling from wherever she's ended up after serving her community service sentence. She wants to apologize and ask if there's any chance of working out some kind of arrangement to return to the neighborhood. I listened to her explanation about how the criminal charges were a wake-up call and how she's learned about the importance of community cooperation. She sounds sincere, but I remember Malcolm's warnings about people who get off on controlling others. I tell her that the community center is open to everyone, including her, but that any return to neighborhood involvement would have to be earned through consistent, positive actions rather than promises or apologies. After I hang up, Malcolm comes over and asks who was on the phone. When I tell him, he just shakes his head and laughs. Some people never learn, Justin. But you handled it right. Actions speak louder than words, and her actions spoke pretty loud. We watch as more neighbors arrive for the celebration, crossing the bridge that started this whole adventure. The day ends with a community meeting in the new hall, where we discuss future projects and improvements. Someone suggests expanding the bridge to include a small community garden underneath. Another person proposes regular community events like outdoor movie nights and seasonal festivals. The conversation is positive, collaborative, and focused on building rather than tearing down. As people are cleaning up after the potluck, I find myself alone on the bridge for a few minutes, looking out over the neighborhood and thinking about how much has changed. What started as a simple property dispute has turned into a lesson about community building, standing up to bullies, and the power of bringing people together instead of driving them apart. Malcolm joins me for the final moment of the story, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a satisfied grin. You know, Justin, when this whole thing started, I thought you were just going to build a bridge and charge people $1 to cross it. I never imagined it would turn into all this. He gestures toward the community center, where people are still hanging out and making plans for future events. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail from the adjacent neighborhood. Apparently, a new HOA has formed and wants to discuss mutual community standards. Malcolm sees me reading it and doesn't miss a beat. Time to start drafting bridge plans again? I grin. Nah, this time I'm charging by reputation, not the dollar. He laughs, pats me on the back and says, "Make it out of stone this time. That way they know it's permanent." We both look toward the sunset-lit bridge, once a joke, now a landmark, and let the quiet victory settle. That's when I pull out the letter that arrived in my mailbox this morning. A notice from a new homeowners association that's formed in the adjacent neighborhood, requesting a meeting to discuss community standards and property maintenance requirements. Malcolm sees the letter and starts laughing. "Here we go again," he says, sipping his coffee. I hold the letter like it's a ticking time bomb and say, "Should I build the bridge now or wait for the first threat?" He shrugs. "Build a moat this time, with ducks. HOA folks hate ducks." Some lessons are worth repeating, and some bridges are worth building twice. especially when the first one taught people how to stand up and the second one taught them how to stand together. I look down at the new foundation, now etched with community names, and think, maybe the third bridge I build won't be over fences, but over fear.
That's it for now from QA Stories. Make sure you're subscribed and the bell's on. The next story might just top this one.